I wake up and I have like a plate of really varied tasks and things to do. I'm really excited by that. So yeah, that's key for me to have diversity in sort of like my everyday work.
Hey guys, so welcome to episode number 4 of the Stills in Motion podcast. Today I'm joined by travel and lifestyle photographer Jeffrey Kieffer. Today on the podcast we kind of chat about like how Jeffrey got into photography, like how it kind of fits into his work today, and how he kind of balances a few different jobs on the go at the same time. I kind of wanted to discuss a bit more of the topic of what it's like to have a photography business on the side of other things, because I think that's something that a lot of us do go through, either temporarily or maybe permanently. And I think it's important to kind of think about why you might have it as a side hustle, or why or how kind of you can manage that effectively. Like Jeffrey is like the ultimate time management like guy, so he's a good guy to get some advice on this from. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Like I think there's a lot of like valuable insights from Jeffrey today. Right, so here we go with episode 4. Right, so thanks Jeff. Cheers for coming on the podcast, mate.
Pleasure, Simon. Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No worries.
Yeah, exciting.
How's life treating you out in Byron Bay at the moment?
As of right now, it's a wet summer. It's been raining and super windy the last like 24 hours. But we've moved here, I think 1.5 months ago, and so far so good in that respect. It's lovely to be back by the beach again and living sort of a life outside of the city.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, lots of positives.
Yeah, man, I bet. I mean, I visited Byron Bay like 3 or 4 years ago now, and I loved it. Such a nice part of the world. Yeah,
it's changing a lot. Like, I think domestically as well, obviously because of COVID and like tourism and stuff. There's a lot of people coming from the bigger cities, so the town swells. I think it's like 10,000 people normally, and then going into town itself is like quite an experience because it's packed at the moment.
Yeah, I bet. But anyway, so for the listeners who maybe don't know, haven't heard of you before, could you like give us a bit of an introduction to kind of who you are and what you're about?
Yeah, sure thing. My name's Jeffrey. I've been an outdoor lifestyle photographer, dabbling in a bit of video as well for the last like 1.5, 2 years. Basically just a simple guy, I would say. Loves landscapes and enjoying, sort of the great outdoors, capturing these sort of authentic moments with friends and whoever's along for the ride, really. I would say starting to do a little bit more commercial work as well. That's sort of become the shift in focus for me, at least in late 2019, 2020. But it's a cool journey to be on.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome kind of seeing how you've progressed like the last like few years, like following you on Instagram and stuff.
Thanks, man.
But
Same to you.
Thanks, man. Back in the beginning, like how did you kind of get into photography? How did that kind of look?
Like I would say end of high school was sort of the start of it all, I guess. It's very like sort of not directly related to finding some particular person that I enjoyed their work of, or it was just kind of like using an iPhone 4, going out with some friends. This was like in the last year of high school, and there's a lot of like waterfalls and sort of nature, rainforests around the school that I went to. So I would often just sort of head out with a bunch of mates in the car, especially on summer holidays kind of thing. And this would just kind of be the pastime, and I found myself sort of racking up a lot of these like, this is kind of a cool photo. You've got all the guys sort of at the waterfall, sort of like this candid style, and then I guess things just kind of evolve after high school, it was a gap year that I took, and then that same interest just kind of kept developing, and obviously you go to different places, and then I guess you just start picking up this inspiration from all the places you visit, or at least for me it was the case. And what set it off was it almost sounds cliche, but a trip to the Philippines in like mid 2017, and that was when I was ready to invest like 300 Australian dollars for a secondhand Nikon, and that was really the beginning of it all. I was so stoked with what I was capturing. Even when I look back on it now, I'm like, what is that? But that was the catalyst. Yeah, if I had to like pin it down to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, where I really found this like love for photography, and especially connecting that with travel, lifestyle, outdoors. Yeah, I would say that's how it happened, and then sort of discovering Instagram, to be honest, and really seeing sort of the breadth of work a lot of people are putting out, and understanding that it is just like a fantastic tool to meet people and to just like create a style and create a name for yourself in that way. That was really inspiring for me. So yeah, that's like more than 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Time flies.
It really does, man. So since then, kind of how has photography kind of like progressed for you, and like what does it kind of look like now, and how does it fit into your life and work today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a huge zigzaggy kind of line, I guess, if you would pop it on a piece of paper. Like it's no sort of like checkpoint sequential kind of like journey. I mean, as is any sort of like, I guess, unorthodox way of life or whatever. But you start kind of with the product exchanges or whatever, like, that you sort of hit up brands for, and then you're just so stoked if you would ever get some sort of collaboration like that, and then same with like if I was traveling somewhere and then getting like the first hotel to stay at in return for some sort of like imagery like deal that you've agreed on. That was sort of like, the foundation, I guess. I guess it sounds kind of funny. I think there's a lot of different opinions as well on like how you should sort of get into the industry, whether you should like work for free, in that sense. But like for me, I wasn't really like concerned about it at that point. It was just more I think getting sort of this confidence up in myself, like, okay, like there's enough people that sort of see value in my work, and doing it this way was a good way for me. And then there was like a certain trip, for that first job that you're sort of compensated for, and that was kind of surreal, I guess. Really surreal. I don't know how in depth you want me to go, but it was like a trip to Iceland. We were shooting some luggage for like a pretty solid brand, and that was like the first peak, I guess. And then it's always personally for me seeing like how can we keep up that momentum, because it really does feel like this sort of like thing you've got to keep rolling. But then after that, it's like realizing that, okay, for this to become a sustainable thing or a semi-sustainable thing, there needs to be some sort of like ongoing effort in terms of like reaching out, putting proposals together, collaborating with people. I think is a huge one. So I think in a nutshell, that's how I found it. A super zigzaggy kind of path so far with things made pretty interesting, especially with COVID. So I was like close to just making that jump into full time in March this year, and then obviously like having quite a few things cancelled like in the same day that I was really looking forward to, like this European summer, or the one that just passed. So it's kind of put that sort of ambition or goal on hold for a bit. But yeah, man.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think like it's the case for a lot of people. Is this like zigzaggy kind of like random route that you sort of go into photography? I think there's very few people right now kind of taking the more traditional route where you go study it or train to be a photographer. I think now it's very
Yeah,
much like you kind of pick up this hobby and then slowly you end up down a pathway of things as they come towards you, or you seek them out. Um,
yeah,
so it's interesting to hear that, because I'm sure there's lots of people that can kind of like relate to you on that. I mean, I can relate to this the same as for me, and I'm sure it's the
yeah.
same for a lot of other people, kind of how they got into it.
It's just
Um,
funny. It's just funny, like push pull. I think, like with like demand and supply. Really, it's like, are people like inquiring about like what you're doing, or do you find yourself in the position where like, oh, I need to put myself out on a limb as of right now to try and get the work. Well, I guess it depends on the situation, right? If you're sort of using photography as like your sole income, um, yeah, this whole like element of like pressure that can come out of all of that is an interesting one to deal with, and then you start like sort of, yeah, I guess your self worth or something kind of just really fluctuates. I think for me at least, um, based on sort of how things have gone in the last month or how things are traveling at the time. So an interesting one.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know how you are with like setting standards in terms of yeah, like not only just like in prices, or but like you have sort of, I don't know, ways to deal with like the highs and lows. You just kind of like stick it out, or I'm quite curious actually.
yeah. It's an interesting one, because like some months will be like brilliant, and some months there'll be nothing.
Yeah,
Like it's very up and down. And I'm sure
yeah,
lots of people, unless they've got regular like repeats sort of work, will probably be in the
yeah,
same position as a freelancer. Like I think
yeah,
it's kind of hard to it's hard to kind of know that. And I think that's like part of it, isn't it? It's that unknown of, oh,
mm,
when is the next thing going to come? And I
mm,
guess it's like finding a balance of being comfortable, and but kind of also being able to take those risks, I guess, if that's like where you want to go, you know what I mean?
yeah,
But yeah, it's definitely a tricky one. I think, yeah, I'm probably not the best person to give advice on that, because I haven't been doing it for as long as other people. But
yeah,
yeah, I'd say for advice for other people kind of listening, like I think a good thing. Well, this is what I did when I went freelance.
mm,
I got to a point where I had a sort of good float, and I'd had a good few like jobs, and then
yeah,
when I was at that point, I was like, right, I can kind of sustain myself for 6 months, 12 months.
yeah,
If nothing happens, if nothing comes my way, I can kind of know that that's going to happen. I can make that gamble on myself and see if it's going
yeah,
to work. And I think that worked for me. Like
yeah.
that's been something that worked for me. So I don't know,
Cool.
but yeah, it's a tricky one. Like kind of knowing when to do it, and I think there is never really probably a right time. Like in all honesty, I think it's
Yeah, no, absolutely.
particularly this year. Like you probably chose the worst time to try.
Yeah, yeah. I'll never forget. Like, it was just coming off like the back of an awesome project, and just getting like literally like 5 emails in a row, and it's like just cancellations. You're like, what is going on today? Really, like, so it's a hard pill to swallow. Well, it was for me, like, earlier this year. So going back to like having this like idea of a float, or giving yourself some sort of breathing room before making the jump, or that sort of commitment. For me, I don't know if it's of value, but like I actually was working remotely. Well, I am working remotely still for a company called Happy Socks, and that's been the way that has yeah, primarily given me sort of that geographic um, dependence, or just being able to be wherever you want, has been super important to me. not only living abroad and being able to squeeze in these sort of like trips for projects on the side kind of, but then also coming here and being able to do the same thing. And I think for me it's important to have this sort of like sense of security in the background. So yeah, I guess there's many ways you can do it, as you said.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely.
also that this year is not the best for it.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky one. Although I do know people who've kind of managed to make it work this year, but it is definitely an uncertain time to make that kind of leap. So I think, yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've got quite a good situation, really. Like, I think being able to. So Happy Socks is based in Sweden, right? But you're currently living in Byron Bay in Australia. So that's like as remote working as it gets, almost.
Yeah, I guess it almost like if you would go on a globe and just like, how far away can I get? It's like the furthest almost. Maybe New Zealand, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like pros and cons with everything. Like amazing to have the flexibility, but then obviously you've got some commitments that time zone wise, find myself on meetings, in the evening, and that's not the best, but it's like part of the situation, I guess.
Yeah, of course. So kind of we get to kind of dive into a bit of like your other jobs because I know they're quite relevant to kind of photography as well. But yeah, I'd kind of like to go back a couple of steps and just talk about kind of like your like studying business at university and kind of how that has helped you go into the jobs that you're doing now and with photography, and or if it hasn't, or
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately no like super clear path was laid out with that like degree. It was like a business communications bachelor, but I think if anything, the marketing side is something that I'm really interested in, and it always fascinates me to see what the latest sort of big dogs are doing in the game in terms of like Alex Stroll and sort of their companies or workshops that they're rolling out. I think it's fantastic how a lot of creatives are just being so inventive with sort of the business ideas or concepts that they're just like putting out on the market, and it really feels like this new wave. But for me, like I would say the main takeaway from like studying at uni for me was like having these like sort of foundational skills of being diligent and understanding just how to put together just like basic emails or reach out to people, or at least have like an sort of an inkling of okay, there needs to be some sort of value exchange, like who am I to a potential client right now, and how can I make myself less of a stranger in sort of like and communicate that in a way that's going to be of value to them, or that might perk their interest. I think just having that sort of basic skill was a good start, because just understanding like how to present yourself in this world, especially one that is so competitive. I think it's really important what gives you that edge per se. So yeah, I don't know if that was a direct answer to what you're asking actually. But
no, it was good. It's interesting because like because I at university I studied geography and then I studied marine science for a master's, so it's kind of a bit unrelated to what I'm doing now. So I kind of just was interested from your perspective, like, because I presume you kind of touched on a few like marketing kind of things during your business degree, and I just wondered like how, if they'd been applicable to your current job at Happy Socks and like with photography as well, like on the business side of things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for the marketing side at Happy Socks, absolutely. But it's always interesting. Like I found with at least with this sort of business degree stuff at universities, there's always this sort of lag maybe a year or two, the information that you're getting at that point in time is not the most updated, right? Like your lecturer is most likely a lecturer full time or for the most part, and not also like running a marketing agency or part of one at the same time. So in terms of like relevance of information and actual like real world application of, say for example, Facebook ads or influencer marketing, it's not like you're getting the latest and greatest. It's still, at the end of the day, comes out of a textbook, and there's a syllabus, and hard for that to change, I guess, especially on sort of like a societal level. But again, I think it's just the foundation, and working to deadlines, working in groups with people. These are skills that you kind of take with you for life, and having a few years of doing that, or having that as like as a focus, I guess, in some ways, that was always a big help for sure.
Yeah, of course. So right now you're working for Happy Socks as what is it you're doing there? You're working on their marketing strategies, are you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So I'm working in influencer marketing mostly, but also helping to manage their socials. So if anything, like connecting that to photography has been fascinating, because it's two sides of the coin, really. In one circumstance, I'm the person reaching out to a business, hoping to get some work or sending a proposal, and on the other side, I receive, I would say, close to 50 collaboration requests per day at Happy Socks. So it's an immense amount of volume, and so over a few years, you kind of build up this sort of like reservoir, or like sort of amount of responses that you're like, oh yeah, that, maybe I could use that in my own photography reach outs in the future. And then you also see like, okay, so many people are going down like an Instagram DM route, and it's like, it's not going to be the way. Like you can't just come to a prospective client just saying, hey, want to collab. Like it's not going to, I would say 99% failure rate if you would go that way. So yeah, seeing both sides of the coin is really interesting, and understanding, okay, what our company is also looking for, or at least what's Happy Socks looking for, something that speaks to their brand aesthetic, and that's going to be universal, right? It doesn't matter if it's socks or a cool baggage company or whatever. There needs to be some alignment with who the person is and who the company is as well. So I think in that case, that's also what I'm looking for when we strike up collaborations on Happy Socks, which is, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, man, I bet. Okay, so being on that side of the kind of influencer marketing side, what would you say are the do's and don'ts for people reaching out for those kind of like social media collaborations?
Yeah, sure. So if there's an element of social media involvement, are you asking like if they want to reach out to do like posts on their feed sponsored by Happy Socks, or are you just saying if they've reached out via social?
I guess reaching out with the prospect of like working with them, either on a photography video like provision for payment, or with that, and then also like social posts, like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would come with an idea. I would come with that idea packaged in a PDF or whatever, and then have the first message be not longer than 2 little paragraphs or something, because the last thing someone wants to read is a background into a random photographer that they don't know yet. That you need to establish like some sort of context to the message, and sort of value driven focus as soon as possible, really, because it's all about capturing attention at the end of the day, and move the conversation away from DMs as quickly as possible. No business deal or photography job on a decent level, I guess, is going to be decided or finalized via DM. That's my experience, at least. So come with an idea. Be succinct with what you're reaching out for. Obviously, introduce yourself like with one line. It's more just like giving an extensive background that sort of glazes my eyes over when I see it myself. So that sort of like foundation for the message, and then also asking for an email where if the message is of interest, because it's always nice to be courteous, I guess. If the message is of interest, move the PDF or offer to send the PDF there to discuss things further, because I think the emails is a format that's just obviously way more suited to sort of having that conversation. But what else? Like, I mean, there's you can get creative with it as well. You wouldn't believe the different types of things that we get sent, like almost on a daily basis. Like people doing shoots already with Happy Socks, and I mean, this is all well and good, but I think it comes down to the images themselves, right? That's where the value is for the company, and if that's sort of not there, then the whole thing it doesn't really matter, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear it from like the other side, because I think you kind of get into a bit of like an echo chamber of people telling you, oh, you should reach out this way. Oh, you shouldn't reach out this way. Like it's kind of hard to know, but I think to some extent you can sort of tell, like Instagram DMs are kind of, I mean, I'm sure they can be a great way of introducing yourself, but it's never going to be something that you can sort of formally agree something. And I'm sure loads of companies are kind of swamped in their DMs. Like they've probably got messages from hundreds and hundreds of photographers or whatever.
Yeah. Did you ever go through a period, or do you often reach out through Instagram DMs? Because I'm curious. Because I definitely went. I think it's a great way to reach out, especially for smaller brands, right?
I think for smaller brands, it's probably a good way, I guess. I think it depends who you want to get in touch with, perhaps. I've never really kind of like reached out that way. I'd rather go for an email, to be honest, because I prefer that way. And I think you can kind of like, you can go and find these people on LinkedIn or
I was about to say,
or like LinkedIn. You know, just by Google search, be like marketing manager for this company, or have a look on LinkedIn and see who's kind of in that role. And I think there's other ways of doing it, to be honest, that probably are more effective. And that you can also just include other things in your email, you know, like what you were saying about maybe including a bit of a pitch deck of like an idea that you had. I think that's going to show a lot more value, like immediately, to someone.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've packaged it nicely in that way, and giving the receiver a reason, or just doing enough to spike their interest to see what you've created for them. I think it's a great first step. And to your point, like LinkedIn, I think is a powerful beast, really. Like, I don't know if it in my universe, if it's like, I consider it like underrated, but I think it's a professional tool that's not only for people in corporate jobs. It's a great way to present yourself, ultimately, in my view, quite like a serious way, and that's always good. You know, connecting with the right folks at the end of the day is always going to do a bundle of good. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's really great, mate. Thanks for those tips and stuff. Like I think having the perspective of someone on the other side is really interesting. I think a lot of people appreciate that.
Yeah, cool, man. I think like at the end of the day, like just practical things that can be so easily overlooked, right? Because there's obviously a million ways to skin the cat in terms of the first contact, and I guess keeping it as short and sweet as possible, whilst also getting your point across, is the way to go. Really, like imagine you would do the reach out via person. Just think like, first of all, how weird would that be? But then also like, how quickly can you give yourself context and make yourself come across in the best way, so that you could continue the conversation and not just sort of be this like, I guess a random person and continue to be that.
Yeah, of course. I guess it's like trying to be personable, but not to the extent where you're writing your life story to someone. And
Exactly.
you're trying to show. I guess you're trying to introduce yourself, but also trying to show how you could add value to that business in as
Exactly.
succinct as way as possible.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better.
So kind of like moving into photography a little bit, like what kind of work are you sort of typically taking on, and what sort of things are you trying to seek out kind of within the photography kind of field?
Yeah, sure. It's mostly like commercial stuff as of 2020. So seeking out maybe like once or twice a month, having a sort of just like a lifestyle shoot. Particularly like as of right now, wanting to do things just locally, not having to travel far, because we've set ourselves up in a place that is quite nice, like in terms of natural surroundings. So for me, yeah, like in like full transparency, it's like, okay, my goal is to always like reach out for a photo shoot, but then see if they're interested in video as well, because obviously I'm sure it's the same for you, but like that's also a very in demand thing, a medium that companies are just wanting more and more of. So yeah, in terms of like those two things, just working, like for me as well personally, working with these sort of bigger clients is something that I want to move towards. And yeah, man, I think we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. No, it seems like it's going all right, mate. You did that gig recently with Asus and 9gag, wasn't it? You did a little video on their laptop.
Yeah, that was really cool. That was I think testament to like the importance of establishing relationships, because we met their team while living in Hong Kong last year. We were living there for like 3.5, 4 months. And for those that don't know, 9gag is like this media company that primarily does like memes on a global scale. And they're based in Hong Kong. And they have like a travel Instagram page as well called Voyage. And after being like just in contact with the person who runs that, and sort of arranging to meet them in person, and establishing this like real life connection, I think was it's just super important in any like business context, because like you want to work with people that you like, and that people that you can be friends with. It makes the whole process more fun and enjoyable. So it was cool to see that sort of like relationship or connection that was struck up like a year ago come full circle now, because then they reach out, and it's like with this really cool opportunity that's super aligned, and it was like to promote their latest, like Asus's latest laptop, and just shot it on the Gold Coast and delivered it. And then it's quite a surreal feeling also seeing like your work pushed out to like the audience that is like that 9gag has. So yeah, I think more projects like that is really what I'm seeking. Getting into that space more, and I hope it's like a snowballing sort of effect. I guess time will tell.
Yeah, No, that's cool. I think it definitely is a snowballing effect, to be honest, in this space. It's like you'll do something for someone and then
Yeah.
someone will be like, oh, someone will see that and be like, oh, he could do that for our business, or someone might in word of mouth just mention you to someone else. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the way it's been for me. It's been through word of mouth pretty much. And
Yeah.
I guess like Instagram is kind of like an extension of that, because it's sort of like I guess like a personal recommendation, being like, oh, have you seen this guy? Or like, if your work's being shared by someone else, like they might see that
Mm.
and sort of find you that way. So I think it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? It's like building up your network through
Yeah.
working with different people and sort of just being a good person to work with. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
that's it.
Being on time with delivery, really, really good to communicate with. I think that's key. Like making sure that there's no grey areas as well with expectation. I think uh, when I've been sorting out jobs in the past, it's like, okay, what are we delivering? Especially if you find that the client's not clear, getting super granular down to like, okay, well, what format do you want a video shot in? And specify like, okay, what's it purpose for, and really trying to like work with them on to achieve like the best end result that's going to be for both parties. I think that's super important. um, yeah, I did have
Yeah.
a thought there, but I think it just evaporated.
That's all right, mate. I know the feeling. But yeah, I think setting client expectations is like super important.
Yeah,
Because I think you want to be on the same page, like to make sure the project goes well, but also you don't want to be giving some kind of like false impression of what it is you're going to create, and then
yeah,
like people
that's an interesting one.
people don't want a surprise. Like people might like a surprise
Yeah,
like birthday party, but they don't want a surprise campaign. You know what I mean? Like no, they don't want a surprise. They want to know what they're going
exactly,
to get.
exactly.
Like if someone's hiring you to shoot a campaign or shoot a
Yeah,
series of photos or shoot an event or like shoot a
yeah,
wedding or something like that, like
yeah.
they want to know that you're
Visually, what to expect.
what they're going to expect. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I don't know about you. Do you put together mood boards, storyboards, treatments for every shoot that you do?
It does depend, but on the bigger scale of things, like there will normally be a bit of a back and forth, and so there'll probably be an initial mood board sent to me and like maybe a bit of
Yeah,
a brief, and then I'll go back with a treatment which is kind of be a bit more planned out of like where the shoot's going to be, what's going to entail, the kind of shot types that's going to be included, and the
yeah,
deliverables, and then a price. Normally, that's
yeah,
like how I do it. But I think it kind of does depend on what it is and the kind of scale of it. And I think for the more prescribed shoots where it's like, or the smaller shoots where it's just very specific, they just want one thing, the treatment may be a bit more brief. But for the more
yeah,
elaborate, like larger campaigns, yeah, I'm
yeah,
sort of generally making treatments and stuff. What about, is that the same
yeah,
for
for
you?
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, almost the exact same. I think I kind of like base it off, okay, the the significance of the campaign of the job, both monetarily and then also like whether it's a seasonal thing that you're actually shooting for someone, or if it's just like a few images for a few social posts or something. Like you kind of also get the feeling of like how much preparation do I need to put in place. I think with like what the approach that I tried to have is like, okay, every time you have an opportunity to work with a brand that's like aligned with you as well, like with what you're interested in, with like for example outdoor brands or whatever. Always try to like keep one foot on like the safe side. Okay, like here's like what you can expect, and then also dabble a bit, whether you mentioned this in the treatment or the storyboard, but in a concept or some sort of whether it's a framing or video. I think video it's more relevant, but like just mixing it up and doing something that you haven't done before on top of the stuff that you're sort of agreed upon. And then obviously like budget permitting or time permitting, you sort of include that in sort of what you delivered. And I think it's a cool way that I found to add this sort of like to your skill set, like being comfortable with more video techniques, for example. I think is the most practical like application of that. I think is really cool. So yeah, that's a cool way to view it, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think like going above and beyond. I guess kind of what we talked about earlier. Like people don't want a surprise. I guess like they're happy to have something extra if it's like if everything else has been delivered. So I guess in those instances where you can go above and beyond and fit something that is within the client's aspirations or like what they're hoping for the shoot. Like I think that's like a really great thing. There's been a couple of instances where like I've implemented that and had like a really good response out of it, and it's something I think there's like a degree of you want to give the client the best experience with you,
absolutely,
and so that they want to work with you again. Like I think that's there's a lot to be said for that. I guess because I part of my business, like half of it is weddings, so I do a lot of wedding photography and filmmaking, and within that, like a massive part of my job is essentially sort of provide a really great experience for the couple on the day and after, and like during, like having great communication and providing something that's above and beyond their expectations, and that the response of that when you've gone above and beyond and you've provided something that only that they weren't expecting but is exactly what they wanted, I think that it goes such a long way. It does. It really does.
Absolutely. It straight away creates this little sort of like, like edge for yourself, right? I think it's an interesting one. With weddings, I can imagine like that's amazing. That must be what you want, because these memories are for a lifetime, etc. So that's super special. I think it's a fine line actually with brands. Like it's always interesting, like the concept of over delivering. Like practically speaking, I think it's a great one, and I try to do it wherever possible. But then I don't know, like I'm keen to get your opinion on this. But like, where do you sort of stand your ground? Like, I'm not gonna like push the boundaries on this, or sort of like choosing when to show the extra value that you can deliver, but then also respect like, okay, what's my time worth? Or
totally
stick to the agreement.
I think when it comes down to like brands and stuff, I would say there is a big caveat with this over providing and like over delivering. Sorry. And I think there is perhaps a better way of doing it, being like, rather than them agreeing to buy, I don't know, 10 photos and you deliver 100, and you just be like, no, you can just have 100 for the same price that you were going to buy 10. Like I would say that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to deliver that gallery of whatever 50 photos. They were going to buy 10 and be like, right, I've actually shot 50 that I'm happy with. Like, if you wanted to buy 10, it's this, what we agreed on. If you want to buy 20, it's this. If you want to buy 30. And like, that is a way of upselling your work, but also over delivering, because you've provided them a choice. They can choose, even if they just wanted to go with the 10, you've provided them a choice of 50 that they can choose 10 from.
Totally. That's exactly the headspace that I'm in, that I go into. It's like, just show them that you went the extra mile, but without actually like giving them, necessarily, because it definitely devalues like your work if all of a sudden you change your tone and you're like, just have it all. Like,
absolutely. I think
you don't want to be that guy.
No.
Or that woman.
No, you definitely don't want to be that person, because like I think that can sort of shoot you in the foot, because if you want to have a long-term relationship with this client, and the first ever shoot you give them 1 million photos for, I don't know, 20 quid or what, like something ridiculous. Obviously that's not going to happen. But like if you do that, then you've just set that as your price point, and I mean, if you can survive off that amount of money a month or whatever you're doing, then like, yeah, good for you. But
Yeah.
I think that in the long term, you're going to find that a difficult business strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to need some revising for sure.
So you and your girlfriend Julia have been doing quite a bit of work together recently, I've seen. And I kind of just wanted to ask you a bit of like how it's been like working together on things like that, and like what's the kind of
Yeah.
like workflow on things when you're doing a project together.
Yeah, sure, sure. So yeah, it's called By Jeff and Julia, and we've kind of branded ourselves as this sort of boutique content creation, um, not agency. We're just two people, right? But like um, the service, I guess. So primarily, it's offering photo and video work, short form social media stuff. So really tailored for Instagram. Um, but then our idea with that is, again, not to be a full-time sort of job. It's just something nice that we can keep running on the side, and it's a great sort of like addition to our relationship. I think it adds like this exciting extra element when you get into business, I guess, with your partner. Interesting journey for sure, because it's just another side to someone that you discover. I sort of that you would discover in no other way. So yeah, in a nutshell, we kind of offer to do, well, what we do currently is like photo and GIFs, sort of like snappy stuff, to keep like a couple of brands' social medias alive, and then we run a couple of ads a month for them as well, and then yeah, it's basically like an Instagram management in that context.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, so it's like also getting their handle and posting for them, scheduling stuff, writing captions, and trying to like grow their community. I think it's a cool way to approach like brands that especially you see could need something like this. They don't you hop onto their you see their digital presence and you're like, you know, we have the potential to offer something more than just like 10 photos, a one-off sort of deal. And if the brand is aligned enough with like what we're interested in, which is very much like sort of holistic health and wellness brands that are like sort of sustainably, ethically minded, all that sort of good stuff. And you know, if there's already some sort of like contact that's been really positive and personable so far, then we send that offer, and this is also for like a monthly retainer sort of thing, which is something that I think again is really important to have this sort of like recurring business. For me, is super important to try and make it that way as much as possible. And yeah, like we've been able to continue that here as well in Byron Bay. We're sort of just like dipping our feet into the market. So far so good. The response is pretty positive. But it's also like just another sort of thing that we're trying to run on the side. So at times it doesn't get as much love as maybe it should, or yeah, it's a funny one to balance with the dynamic of working together as well. Like we've had our ups and downs with that for sure, as you can maybe imagine. But primarily, like in terms of like roles and responsibilities, Julia has got a keen eye for like sort of this sort of laying out flat lays, these sort of detailed shots where I don't know, I think maybe my eye was sort of like developed with sort of the bigger landscape kind of like lifestyle scenes. But I think it balances itself out really well, you know, if we're doing product photography, for example, and you need to get super in detail, and I'm often just like whacking a few objects in, just like, yes, looks sweet, but then Julia will take the extra moment to really sort of like lay things out nicely and frame them and really consider lighting as well, more so than I would. So in that way, it's a fantastic balance. yeah, and then editing is sort of like something that we share and give our opinion on. It's so interesting, like how subjective that whole process is. Like, I think this could be warmer. It's a bit green, you know. It's like, I don't know, like who's right, who's wrong. You just kind of like meet in the middle is like the end result, I guess. And yeah, what else? Like the marketing side of things. Have some experience with ads and stuff, so that's like my domain. And then she's well versed with like the marketing tools, so like with scheduling and stuff like that, and more Instagram friendly. So yeah, it's funny how we've like found ourselves in that place.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool. I get it kind of just when I think about all the stuff you do, I'm like, wow, dude, how do you fit all this stuff in? Because we haven't also touched on the fact that you also work for a Facebook ads agency, don't you, remotely as well?
Yeah, absolutely,
So
absolutely. So
you've got about four jobs we've kind of spoken about today, and
yeah, it
I
sounds a
just
bit weird almost.
yeah, I just wanted to know like
Yeah.
how do you kind of balance like that? Like, do you have any good time management tips? Because I definitely need them.
Yeah, man, like time management is everything. Sounds super cheesy, but I have my, like in terms of structure, literal structure, it's like four buckets, right? It's like for me, by Jeff and Julia, maybe some personal work that I have going on. That's just like my photography umbrella, the Facebook ads, and then Happy Socks. And so I kind of have like my to-dos, or I call it an excitement list. I think I got that from like like Chelsea Kouai or something. I don't know if you know that. Yeah, yeah. But she has a great way of approaching like work-life balance. So I would definitely check her out
Oh, mate, I need
if you're
to.
interested into. Yeah, she's got some great blog posts as well. But I'm not sure now if I'm really just like echoing what she does. But I think she starts. I'm not sure if it's her now, but starting the day with like doing the task that you really didn't want to do first, or like that you've been putting off for a while. I always have something that ends up being this task. So whether it's as simple as like paying a bill, or editing photos or whatever, it's like do that first, and then the rest sort of follows. But yeah, what else in terms of time management? I use a thing called Tomato Timer.
Oh yeah,
Have
what's
you heard of
that?
that?
No.
The Pomodoro method, where you work for like 25 minutes on, and it's you would just type in like tomato timer in Google, and it's like the idea is you see this timer that's like 25 minutes set on your desktop, and I don't know, for me it like spurs me on. I'm like, oh, I gotta get this task done before the timer goes. And then when the timer does go, you can choose to take 5 or 10 minutes break, and then that's really just like I don't do anything, or I just like watch YouTube or something. And then the cycle repeats itself. And depending on how productive you feel, you can just like extend that 25 minutes by another, and then you find yourself doing 50 minutes if you're like engrossed in the same task, and then taking probably 10 minutes after that. But for me, I think those are like the main things. Like right now, working a lot as it may sound. So to be fair though, it's like mostly to compensate for how like unfortunate earlier this year was for me. So I think that's like on a very personal level. So I'm just like in my mind trying to make up for that. So when things are as busy as they are, and I wake up and I have like a plate of really varied tasks and things to do, I'm really excited by that. So yeah, that's key for me to have diversity in sort of like my everyday work.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think having a diversity of things to do is kind of like something I guess you wouldn't necessarily have if you were like purely photography, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And they all kind of like feed into each other at the end of the day. It's like with Facebook ads, for example, it's understanding what asset will will elicit the best response from your target audience. And sort of with that in mind, you then can sort of, you could brand yourself as someone who creates like content or delivers video and photo that's tailored for paid ads. So yeah, just a thought.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting, mate. It's really interesting. So kind of like with all that in mind, kind of like where are you kind of like aiming at the moment? Like what's the kind of like goals with or like aspirations for the next few years for
Yeah,
for Jeffrey Kieffer?
And it's an interesting one. If you would have asked me a year ago, I think it would have really been focused on like putting like getting that name out there with like commercial work. But I've kind of like fallen off the whole like strict goal setting, because I think this year has given to me more than anything a wake up call in terms of like understanding that nothing is really constant, or things can just turn upside down in a split second. So for me, trying to be at any given point like as happy as I can be with whatever it is that I'm doing, and continuing along that path. It's like, number one, top three priority. Another one is also just being like location independent. That's super important, given that Julia's from Sweden, and our aim is to like live a life between these two continents. So yeah, that's in a nutshell. Like there's no strict I want to be this in like 5 years for me right now. It's just like enjoying it, taking it as it comes, just plodding away. I think consistency and habits are super important. Super important.
Yeah.
What about for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. When hearing you say that, like I definitely resonate with that, because like I think the whole reason I made the plunge for photography was this freedom, like the freedom to kind of like do your own thing, and like to like be your own boss, and to kind of decide when you're going to work, how you're going to work, what you're going to do, all these kind of things. And like recently I for this winter I've taken on a part-time job working as a marine science consultant, and that's kind of been a part-time alongside my photography, and like the last few months have been hectic, and like there's been a lot going on, and I think it's kind of made me realize how much I appreciate the freedom and the time to kind of work to my own sort of routine and my own sort of to-do list. And I think that's maybe a bit of a privileged like a feeling, but I feel like I work a lot better independently. Like I'm quite a driven, generally like sort of quite productive person. I do like to kind of set my own sort of agenda. So I think for me, like just keeping that sort of freedom and that ability to kind of do what I want to do when I want to do it, and like to make money so that I can continue the life that I want to lead. I think that's
absolutely.
That's kind of it for me.
I love it, man. Yeah, it boils down. Like I love how you boiled it down to something as simple as that, right? I think I'm totally in the same boat. Having this feeling of autonomy and being in control. I think of not like your destiny or whatever, but like just what your day-to-day looks like, and enjoying it all the while, or as much as you can. Always peaks and troughs, but that's really cool, Simon. Cool.
Yeah, I think like it's very easy to get into the rut of being like, oh, I want to be this in 2 years' time. I want to be this in 5 years' time. And I think realistically, if you're aiming for this end goal, like when you get there, it's probably going to be disappointing. Like
absolutely. And then what after? Like life is a long thing, right? Not to get too like meta here, but like people who work to like hopefully retire in their 30s. It's like, what are you going to do after? For me, that's what I always think. Like, if you've got something that you're enjoying, just like follow that, and don't, it's a blessing in itself. So
yeah, exactly. I think to kind of, to have your goal to, have not every day, but have like most days as something you're excited to do and enjoy. Like like if you wake up, like you were saying, you wake up every day and you've got like an exciting list of things to do, and like that's such a nice space to be in, and I think that's a good thing. Obviously, you're gonna have to have tasks that you're like, oh, do I have to do this now? But like, everything comes with that. There's ups and downs to everything, but if like on the whole you're doing something that you enjoy and you love and like it gives you excitement, I mean, what better thing to do?
Yeah, exactly. And key for me is like, don't stop. Don't, if you haven't found that yet, in case people are trying photography now and it's not for them, then try something similar or totally different, because I do think it's like there is that activity, or there is that sort of there are those interests that a lot of people are just like yet to discover. Don't stop trying until you really have like hit that on the head.
Yeah, absolutely. And I part of the reason I wanted to kind of have this chat with you is because like I think for a lot of people there's this aspiration of trying to get to the point of being a freelance photographer or like being full time. That's your only thing. And I kind of wanted to have you on to kind of give the alternative opinion of like it's great to have that, but it's not the only way you can have a life that that you enjoy. Like
absolutely.
There's so many other ways that you can kind of integrate it into different jobs or remote working or things like that. So I think it's really cool, and I'm sure it's been inspirational for a lot of the listeners.
Cheers, man. That means a lot. Thanks so much. I think like when I was again, not to go on about it much, but like when trying to make that move into full time, I really found that pressure was diminishing how much I actually enjoyed like photography and the whole act. It's like there's that classic like passion turns into a job, and then it's like not as fun anymore. It's like, well, if I was feeling that, then that's also a sign that I needed to like pivot away. So I guess just being like aware, different case by case, obviously, but
yeah, absolutely, it's going to be different for anyone making that step. Like, I think the kind of answer, well, not the answer, but like the thought process is that it doesn't have to be that. If it doesn't feel right, like it doesn't have to be the thing you do. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
At the end of the day, you've got to do something you enjoy and makes you happy and doesn't ruin this thing you love. You know what I mean? Like if you start working as a photographer and then you hate it, like maybe it's better just to have photography as a hobby.
Yeah, facts. Exactly. I think the telltale signs are like you get stressed out, and it's not worth it because you spend more time being stressed than actually like enjoying. Then you can be in a bad place for sure. Yeah,
right. I think we've been chatting for a while, Jeff. So
maybe sorry, mate.
No, it's been good. It's been good to chat with you. It's really, really interesting, and I'm sure listeners will have found it interesting to hear all about Mr. Kieffer.
Yeah, I hope so. That's cool. So first podcast. So thank you for making the debut. such a pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on. It's also awesome to chat and to get you to know you better through this whole thing as well, man.
Yeah, of course. Right, mate. We'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hey guys, so I hope you enjoyed that chat with Jeffrey. I thought it was really interesting to kind of hear his perspective on what it's like to work freelance as a photographer, but also to balance that alongside other commitments and other part-time jobs, and how it's kind of working towards his goal of being sort of autonomous in his work and in his ability to kind of travel around the world and sort of work remotely. I think like remote working has become a massive thing this year, and so it's really interesting to see how he's kind of making that work and how photography kind of fits into that. So if you want to find more from Jeffrey, you can find him on Instagram. It's at Jeffrey Kieffer. I'll put the link to his Instagram in the description below. And if you want to see more of his photography work with Julia, you can find them. It's by Jeff and Julia on Instagram as well, and there's links to their website as well. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you on the next one.